All right. You want to do one of those fancy introductions that you like to do?
Oh, of course. This is going to be great.
All right. Go ahead.
All right. Welcome to the Behave Yourself podcast. Let me try that again. I can be serious.
I think it was perfect.
Welcome to the Behave Yourself podcast. That was creepy.
No, that was great. That
Okay.
was, we talked about how you're very intimidating, and I think that was spot on.
I've gotten that a lot, and I feel like you also have received that feedback.
That I'm very intimidating.
I don't find you intimidating.
You don't think I'm the big scary man?
No.
I don't think you're a big scary man either.
That's great. So I often remind people that provide me the feedback that I am intimidating, that I am not intimidating. You are, in fact, intimidated. And you need to work on that shit outside of work.
It's always their problem.
I mean...
Becky's perfect.
I am. Hi. Episode 59.
Okay. Okay, episode 59. And you
Welcome.
have something you're very passionate about that you wanted to discuss.
Well, I think this is something that a lot of people are passionate about right now, as there's a lot of people noticing that not all ABA practitioners are equal. We may all have to abide by the same ethics code, but that doesn't mean that we all provide the same services. So there are a lot of people that hate ABA.
Because they didn't get Becky ABA.
Correct.
Okay, so what type of ABA did they get?
My guess, just based on the information that I've read and I've looked into, is that people got very discreet trial, punitive ABA.
Forced eye contact type stuff? Okay.
Yes.
And why is that bad?
Well, there are a lot of reasons that it is bad. Because number one, it doesn't feel good. If you have to sit as a child at a table for long periods of time. I don't know if you have hung out with children recently.
I mean, it's hard for me to look you in the eye for 3 seconds right now. Yeah, it's very uncomfortable.
So a lot of times people put things into place that aren't what typical children would be experiencing every single day. And so that is not fun, really. So sitting at a table for long periods of time, I can't sit at a table for long periods of time. I like to be up and moving.
I also like to be up and moving, yeah.
Learning things very discreet trial, while our research does show that DT is very helpful. It is helpful in certain situations, absolutely. But doing everything DT can be monotonous and not fun. So a lot of children have lived through that.
And just for assuming that there are people listening that don't know, DTT is discrete trial training, right?
Yes.
I originally thought it was DDT, like the wrestling move when you drop the guy on his head.
Yeah.
So we're not dropping kids on their head.
No, God, no.
Okay, so it's discrete trial training, and what that means, if anybody doesn't know, is basically the practitioner contrives the learning opportunities, right? And it winds up being a lot of table time, which is not really the definition, but that's what it winds up being. Whereas the opposite, which is NET, and that stands for
Naturalistic.
You're not even going to do the other two?
Do they really matter?
Too good for that?
Yeah.
Okay. It's natural environment training. And that's more child-led and things that may happen in real life. Kid wants a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. You teach him how to make it. His reward, he gets to eat it.
Correct.
Right? Not you make a kid stare you in the face for 3 seconds and then you give him a
Good
piece of
job.
cookie.
Good job.
Right. So clearly we want our programs to move from DTT to NET as much as possible. But for early learners, and we first starting the program, it's not possible. So the question then is, how do we do DTT without making them feel uncomfortable and without using a whole bunch of punitive procedures and things like forced eye contact that make people dislike ABA?
That's a wonderful question, Alex. Thank you.
Thanks. That's why I asked it.
So
My name's not Alex, by the way.
a lot of things come into play. Specifically, you need to look at what the parent values as far as their goals for their child. And that will determine what direction we're going into, the kids' motivation and what they prefer to do, because you can fit that within lots of context of learning. Even with our clients that require more DT, you can still start them in the direction of using NET just through motivation and imitation of their play, etc.
Okay, there are things that ABA is going to do that people won't like.
Right.
And we have to strike a balance between how much of that is acceptable and how much is harmful. For example, we have this thing called masking, right? And people don't like masking. Some people don't like it. And what that means is that they feel like we are masking their autism. And we're saying, we don't want you to be autistic anymore. That's what they think when they're talking about masking. We're trying to hide it. And there's a couple of ways to look at it. And our field has not really decided on what is the right way to look at it. But on one hand, people with autism are individuals, just like everybody else. They have their own way of thinking, acting, and we don't want to take that away from them. So you need to strike a balance where, right. So you need to strike a balance where you're not taking that away from them. At the same time, you can't have a kid just running around the classroom disturbing everybody, right? And 20 kids in the class and the teacher can't teach because this kid's up and dancing the whole time. So yeah, the kid can dance, but if you want to be part of the society, we have rules that we all have to adhere to. I mean, I don't like wearing pants, but I had to put on pants today.
Yeah.
Right? Can't come to your house with no pants.
That would have been a strange situation.
Very strange. So we all have rules. And it depends on what, like you said, you made a good point that it depends on what the goals are. If you have a child who is clearly at the point where he's always going to need support, he's going to be in special education forever, maybe he's going to have to live in a group home, and you've already established this as a family, then things like toe walking don't matter. Let the kid toe walk, right? Let the kid flap his hands at these other stereotypy type behaviors. But if your goal for your child is you see him being able to one day shed his diagnosis or even just have a family, drive a car, have a job, if those are realistic goals, well, then toe walking and hand flapping are going to impede those goals because other people in our society are going to think that's weird and it's going to hinder them socially. And we have to consider all of these things. So I don't think it's the same for every case, for every client, every child. But even when we work on those things, we need to recognize a humanistic way to work on it, right?
Right.
To be able to keep the integrity. And things like I mentioned before, a forced eye contact is, to me, unacceptable. It's just, it's not going to have the effect you want anyway.
You can have a full conversation without looking at anyone.
Yeah. I just kind of did, right? I wasn't looking at you really because it's I have to look at you, I have to talk in the microphone.
It's a lot. It's a lot of work.
Two things at once.
Yeah.
Am I allowed to take a drink of water or is that?
You're allowed.
That's okay?
It's okay.
Right.
Feel free to take a sip of water. So, piggybacking off of your masking, we do all mask. For some people, it is definitely more painful than others to hide your individualistic self. Absolutely. But
I've had to fart this whole time and I didn't do it.
Thank you.
Yeah. You know, you go to a meeting and how many of those people, they want to fart? There's 12 people around and they...
They just hold it in.
Yeah.
That's why everybody looks so angry in meetings because they need to get out to go in the hallway to just let it rip.
Exactly. That's why the meetings suck. Everyone's like, okay, when's this
over
over so I can go take a shit? And yeah, exactly. But we all know
yes,
I cannot poop in this meeting.
I cannot.
So when people say things like, toe walking serves a medical purpose. Okay, well, so does farting, but we still learn to not do it at certain times.
Right.
So we have to learn when to do it is the key.
Yes.
Or just not be part of our everyday society, which is not a great option.
No. That's got to be a hard decision for parents to make.
Absolutely.
To try and imagine what their child's life will be like in 15 years.
I think it's very difficult. And I make every one of them answer that question. Yeah.
Where do you want to see your child in
do.
5 years? I ask the same question because I want to know what their hopes and dreams are for their children.
What are we working on here, right? What
so
are we
then-
getting toward?
Right. So then we can set our goals based on what they truly want to see their child. Sometimes they have unrealistic expectations, but we can get there at a slower pace. And that's a tricky conversation to have in general.
Yeah, well, that gets into social validity, which is, I think, something we'll talk about in another episode. Maybe we'll touch on it briefly later, but there is something to that. I wanted to mention that a few months ago, somebody posted on Google about my agency, and it was a guy who has autism. And he said, ABA, I don't remember the exact phrasing, but he said, ABA is terrible. It's abuse. It hurts people. I've never met this guy in my life.
Yeah.
But he went on, I think he was just going around finding ABA companies and posting this on there. Google took it down because we said, we don't know this guy. We've never met him.
Right.
And I wasn't even mad at him. My first thought was, somebody gave this guy bad ABA.
Yeah. That makes me feel terrible for him.
Yeah. And now he thinks this is what ABA is. And I want to tell him, somebody did it wrong.
Yeah.
That's not what it's supposed to be. It's not supposed to be abuse. It's not supposed to have negative psychological impact on you.
We're supposed to use reinforcement first.
Right.
So my guess, based on just how he wrote a review, he likely had, number one, terrible ABA, obviously, but also likely high uses of punishment, which makes me question whether or not his BCBA use the reinforcement like they're supposed to. But there are lots of adults with autism that are coming out saying that they had terrible ABA, and that makes me so sad for them.
Me too. I mean, what are we doing here? If that's what's happening, right?
Right.
We're supposed to have the opposite effect.
If I'm not having fun when I'm working with my registered behavior technician and our client or the parents, then I know the child's not having fun.
Yeah. And you're always having fun.
All the time.
You were saying that people don't like to be told what to do. And in some cases, we have to be told what to do. We get that.
Yes.
Right? Everyone hates their boss. All bosses are assholes for some reason. Right?
My boss is the
Becky.
best.
Becky is the best boss.
I am the best.
And you know what? Me. Everyone who ever worked for me, they all said I was the best, and nobody ever said anything differently.
I mean.
Okay. So I always thought about these situations where we have at school, especially this comes up a lot with math, where there are some children who you could say any number, give me 36 times 48, and they'll have the answer in 3 seconds, right?
Yeah, human calculators.
Yeah, it's very rare, but there are some people out there that can do that. And our school doesn't accept that.
No, they
say
make you show your work.
Yeah. And I'm thinking, what is the point? The point is to know how to get the answer.
They just
Who cares how you get there, right? Why does everyone have to get there the same way?
Because everybody has to fit in the same box.
Well, I don't like that box.
I understand. I don't like the box either,
Well,
which
then
is
how
why
do you-
I step on the box and smash the box.
Then how do you
into a
think
million
that
pieces.
kid feels if we hate the box and we're not even in it
It's the worst.
or out?
In? Out?
In? Whatever's funnier.
I don't know.
All right. Well, anyway, so the kid, imagine someone gives you a math paper,
Right.
and you do the whole thing
In your head.
in 4 minutes, and they're all correct, and someone says you failed. How is that okay?
I would crumple the paper, and now I'm shut down, and I'm not participating in math anymore because what's the point?
Yeah, what this would do in reality, and I think probably does, is cause more behavioral issues, right?
Yeah.
And why do we have to cause behavioral issues over nonsense?
I know
You
the
could you
answer.
could make him. All right, well, hold on to it. Patience, waiting program. If you make that kid write out all the answers, and even if he says, "Okay, I'm going to do it this way just because they're making me," when he's 25 years old, how is he going to do math? The way that they made him, or the way that he's always done it, where he gets the answer in 2 seconds?
100% the way he always has done it in
So
2
why
seconds.
are we trying to change that? All right, give me your answer.
Because people like to be in control. Adults like to be in charge.
Mm-hmm.
And again, children have to fit in a box. For a long time in society, children were supposed to be seen and not heard. And the same goes with teaching children skills, whether you get bad ABA, whether it's in education, whether people are parenting like boomers. That is the deal. Children must be seen and not heard. And children are not allowed to have opinions or thoughts about how they should learn things, because everything is scripted as to how people should be educating you. I think that's why a lot of practitioners, BCBAs, like curriculum, because then they're told what to do. Because as a society, the whole point is for you to be a cog in the machine. Right?
It's very sad.
It's very sad.
You just
Society
took all the
sucks.
air out of the podcast.
Society sucks, but that's the deal. And I think
Is that on the BCBA exam? That
it
society
should be.
sucks?
It should be. The answer is society sucks. But that, I think, is why autistic adults are so pissed right now, is because they A, got bad ABA, and B, they were not made to fit in the box. But the education system that they were thrust into is forcing them to fit inside a box.
And to be honest, you and I don't fit in the box. That's why we...
Hell no.
That's why we're the smartest and funniest people.
Obviously.
At least the smartest and funniest people that ever did an ABA podcast
Obviously.
in your house. But
Welcome.
but we were able to mask it ourselves, right? Not that we have autism, but we masked our outrage, our angst, and we did it because we were able to see, I have to do this.
I have to.
I want to get a degree. I want to get a job. I want to be on a podcast telling everyone that this is all terrible. And we did it. So we don't fit in the box. But a lot of the people who don't fit in the box can't try to mask it. They can't try to fit in, and it might drive them to a lot of challenging behavior. What else do we need to do to get people to do better ABA, to recognize that some things that we think are important might not be important, like eye contact, as you know, it's important to a certain extent, but not worth holding someone's head in, you know, and making them stare you in the eyes, right? So how do we get people to understand that and pick better programs to work on, pick better interventions that will have better long-term effects?
When we talk about our social validity episode, I think we're going to hit on a lot of that, because I think a lot of it has to do with making sure that the programs we put in place are socially valid.
That was a tease you just did. That's professional.
Thank you.
That's a tease. Like, join us on the next one.
Join us on the next one where we talk about social validity. So social validity is very important. Taking the child's opinions into account, I think, is also important as to what they enjoy, especially if you're working with an older client that can communicate their thoughts and feelings about things, or a younger client that can communicate their thoughts and feelings. Providing choices, asking them questions about what they want to do or work on. That is helpful. But we're talking about training people.
Right.
So,
but we can train them to ask that.
Yes. Also, getting the kids to ask why is helpful. So then they can learn to self-advocate, because nothing is worse than you telling a child to do something and them doing it every single time. That's weird.
Yeah, it's weird.
So weird. That's when you've created robots. And
Like when people program, "How are you?" and he says, "Good."
Good.
How is that? How is that
Actually,
helping?
Actually, I'm terrible today. Thank
My
you.
day sucks.
Have you ever done that to somebody? They're like, hey, how are you? And you're like, actually, terrible.
Yeah.
And they're like,
oh, shit. Why did I ask
what?
that?
Okay, have a great day.
yeah.
They're like, oh, damn. I'm like, I try not to ask that question unless I truly want to know the answer.
It's like, how are you today? Well, had a lot of diarrhea.
It's been a real shitty day.
Yeah, they're just just a quick side note. I've had parents ask me, we're teaching him how to have small talk, but how do we get him to care? And I tell them, nobody cares.
Nobody cares.
Nobody cares.
Newsflash, nobody gives a shit about small talk.
Yeah, nobody likes it. We do it because we feel uncomfortable, and we've been conditioned to. You get in the elevator, it's like, ooh, nice weather we're having today. Nobody wants that.
Who wants to talk about the weather?
Nobody cares. So I tell them, he's good. Nobody cares. He also doesn't care. We're good. No training needed.
No training needed.
So my biggest thing is something we talked about very briefly, but in the initial assessment and periodically going on afterwards, I can't stress the importance of asking their goals enough. Where do you see yourself in a year, 5 years, 10 years? What are your life goals? And if they're young, what for the family? What are your life goals? I didn't know what my exact life goals were when I was young. I didn't know until yesterday. But
I wanted to be a teacher.
You are a teacher.
My whole life. I wanted to be a
really?
teacher. Yeah.
Good.
I was one.
I mean, you're
For a little bit.
you're not a teacher, but you teach.
Yes.
So you're a teacher.
Yeah.
I never knew what I wanted to do. I was always a behavior analyst, even before I knew that was a profession. I just always analyzing people. But the point is, I'm not talking about specifics.
Right.
I'm talking about, do you see your kid living with you? Do you see your kid having an apartment? Do you see him living in a group home? Do you see him going to college? Do you see him having a girlfriend or a boyfriend or whatever it may be, right? And these questions help shape what we need to be working on because
it's going to be much different if,
of course,
you say my child is going to go to a group home versus I want them to be independent living in their own apartment or house or whatever.
Exactly.
Completely different.
Completely different program. All the goals should be different at that point.
Absolutely.
So
if they're the same, then we need to have a whole separate conversation and you can email me so that we can talk about how you should actually be programming.
Do you want to give them your email?
No.
Okay. What we'll do is on the bottom links, I'll include the podcast email, and they can tell us how wrong we are about things.
I would love that.
And then we'll do a thing where we read them sometimes.
Oh, that's a great idea.
That's fine. I just came up with it. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is it's similar, but to ask every time before you put in a goal, is this okay for us to put in? Is it okay to work on? I know that every 6 months we do a new treatment plan. We get it signed because insurance tells us to. And we're supposed to go over the big changes anytime there's real changes. But
and what those are going to look like.
Yeah, and it doesn't need to be a big thing. I'll say to the parents, hey, he mastered two-step listener compliance. Do you want us to... I'm thinking about moving to 3-step instructions. Is that okay? And they say yes. And what's the harm in that? And I mean, no one ever says no to that. But first of all, they know what you're working on and where they're at. And second of all, okay, this is all right for us to work on. It takes 3 seconds. And that's an easy one. But sometimes there are things that people really don't want you to work on.
Yeah.
And sometimes there's things that they do want you to that you may not think are important, right? To me, if a kid eats, okay, he's good, he's eating. But for some families, it's very important.
Very specific
we have family.
Amount.
Yeah, we have family time. He has to eat all his vegetables. He has to sit here until the last person is done. And I don't agree with that, but that's not my decision. We need to be asking the parents, what's important to you? To a certain extent. I mean, if they say, I don't want to work on aggression, I just want to let my kid hit people, then obviously we can't do that.
Right.
But for the most part, we should be not looking at ourselves. We should be looking at them and saying, I'm going to help you work on what you think is important. So that's my parting advice on these. Ask them what's in the future, and think about how to help them get there, and ask them what's important, and every recommendation that you have, is this something that's meaningful to your family or not?
Absolutely. Think critically, like we said before. Talk to people that also provide services to see if they've found new research. Always be learning. Those are my parting words.
Those are great words. And I feel like we should do this thing at the end of the episode.
Oh, yeah.
Where we go, all right, that's all for today. And then everybody, behave yourself.
Okay, let's do that.
Yeah.
Okay, are we going to say it in unison?
Yeah, we have to do it in unison. Okay.
I'm feeling very
I'll do the lead in.
Okay.
And then we'll behave yourself together.
Okay.
Give me a good Becky voice.
Okay.
All right, everybody. That's it for today. And remember,
Behave yourself.
That was so good.